Yeah, I grew up in I would say a dysfunctional home. My mom was addicted to prescription pills, and my father was a workaholic. I am the eldest of I have two younger brothers. Growing up for me was very chaotic. My mom was always, her pattern was sleep till noon, um, roll out of bed, pretty much just smoking cigarettes, going for coffee, and then going to play bingo in the evenings. My dad was constantly working. I raised myself a lot of the time. I'd say I guess I would say I was neglected in ways it wasn't very healthy. That pattern of lifestyle. I ended up pursuing kids in school as I went to school, pursuing kids that could relate to me and had similar experiences in their lives. So I formed a network of friends, of people who could relate to me. I started to get into drinking in elementary school, and by grade 9, I was already using drugs quite heavily. My parents were always fighting at home, so I would kind of come in and out whenever and be at home at times, go back to friends, and that's kind of how I lived. And I remember one day in particular, I went home and my mom's stuff was gone, and she ended up leaving my dad and didn't even tell me she was leaving. And I ended up finding out from my grandfather that my mom was renting this apartment in my hometown, and my dad was now living in our family home for a little while until my dad had, like, he had to claim bankruptcy. So then him and my other brother went into an apartment. And in the midst of all this turmoil, I did have a grandmother who was close to me that I would go to as well. In the beginning of my life, when I was going through a lot of chaos, my grandma was always there for me. And in the midst of that time period, my grandmother was diagnosed with lung cancer and had died. So it was really hard for me because I didn't know where to turn anymore or what to do as a child. I had the burden of course, the thoughts of my mom. Now that my mom's mom died, I was worried that my mom would harm herself, because my mom used to threaten that, which was very dysfunctional and should never have been placed on my shoulders. But I grew up a lot of the time listening to my mom saying she was going to harm herself. And I thought, now that her mom died, was she going to do that? Right. So these are thoughts I carried. And then these thoughts also were used in a sense in the back of my mind, but they also geared me more towards my addiction of the alcohol and drugs I was now using. I ended up being placed in a room and board situation. I went to social services and discussed with them some of the things I've been through, and they placed me in room and board with one of my aunt and uncles. My aunt was my mom's oldest sister. They didn't have any kids, and I tried my best to be there and to do the best I can. But as dysfunctional as your home life is, you miss that. You're used to that pattern of lifestyle. It was hard for me to adapt to my aunt's home. I ended up actually leaving her home and I quit school. And this has been about grade 9. And I ended up continuing to live to feed these addictions. And of course, you need money for these addictions. So I was doing things that weren't right. And I was placed in juvenile jail. When I was in jail, I had found out that my mom had now met this man and she got married to him. So, and then soon I learned after that, once I was out of jail, I had learned now this man was abusing my mom physically and abusing my little brother. And it was really hard for me to deal with that, because I thought, what can I do? Like in a situation like this, what if I tell somebody and they take my little brother away on my mom and my mom hurts herself? Like, why would I want that on my shoulders? I was like, at the time, I was like a teenager myself. I didn't know how to carry this burden. It wasn't fair I had this burden, but this is how I'm processing things. I was just a teenager. And I thought, and also, like, when I told somebody, some counselor, some of the things I was going through at the time, I was placed in room and board. And how did room and board even get to the root issues of my life? It didn't, right? It didn't get to any of the root issues. So what I did was I just completely went back into my addictions to cope with my pain. I ended up becoming pregnant when I was 19. And I remember telling my mom I was pregnant, and she told me I should have an abortion. I didn't even know what an abortion was. I knew nothing about fetal development. I had no idea that the baby's heart was beating already at 3 weeks. And I remember I thought, well, I'm going to go to the doctor. And I went to the doctor, and I remember him telling me that I should have an abortion and him giving me a date as to when I have this abortion. And I remember the roller coaster of emotions I had go through my mind. I remember I had one friend tell me it was my body, my choice. The other friend told me she'd help me raise the baby. Well, I knew my one friend was messed up. That wasn't going to happen. I didn't want a child anywhere near my mom's home and what was going on there. My dad wasn't in the picture. So I thought this was the best decision. And I remember at this time, I thought, I'm just going to follow through with this abortion. I'm addicted to drugs and alcohol. And, I honestly have to say that I was more concerned about missing the party on Friday and getting drunk and high than that child in my womb. That's how much addiction had a grip on me. It was terrible. I ended up having this abortion where I choose to end my own baby's life. I remember my friend dropped me off at the hospital, and I went into the hospital, and in the hospital, I went in this elevator and I went up, and that was it. I completely blocked everything out because it was so traumatic for me. But then right after this abortion, the shame and guilt that I had from my childhood had now gotten even heavier on my shoulders. The load was even more hard to bear because I felt like I had done the most lowest, horrible, horrendous thing. And how could I even love myself? How could anyone, how could I even respect myself or love myself? I had done the most heinous thing, I just felt so low and disgusting. I ended up even harder into my addictions, and I was placed in jail again now for the third time. And of course, I had to sober up in jail. So these feelings of my past and my background were coming up, as they would come up, I'd push them down because I wanted to pretend I was this hard person, that no one could hurt me. I had this wall built around me that I would let nobody in. I didn't tell anybody about my secrets. I kept everything inside, and I just let it fester inside me and eat at me and eat at me. And that's kind of how I lived my life. I ended up actually, when I got out of jail, becoming pregnant again. And I remember going home and telling my mom that I'm pregnant. And my mom told me I should have another abortion. And of course I said, no, there's no way I could have another abortion. I know what that did to me. I ended up putting drinking, the drugs, everything cold turkey. And I remember the migraines I had, but I was determined I wanted to have this baby. When I was 3 months pregnant, my mother died of an overdose. Now, this is the second time in my life that addiction has taken life. First, my child in my womb, and now my mother. You know how hard that was to deal with all that, and then to see my mom die, that really, really affected me to my core. I ended up, in a way, taking a spin from this and looking at it as if, I hate to say it, but it's almost like my mom's death gave me life. It made me realize that addictions can kill you. And it really woke me up to the fact that, when you think you can just stuff yourself with all these addictions and that you're invincible, and, the reality is you're not invincible and you can harm your body. My mom was only 43 when she died. And I think it is so sad to see what addiction has done in society and what it's doing in homes and households. And sadly, I lost my mom because of addiction. I ended up actually carrying this baby to full term, and I had a baby boy who I believe is the angel who saved me. He was my second chance at life as well. I ended up marrying the father of my son. And the sad thing is, you will attract who you are. And I was dysfunctional, so I attracted dysfunctional. So I attracted someone that was abusing me and treating me poorly. And I allowed it because I had no self-worth. I didn't love myself. I thought this was what I'm worth. I'm destined for this life. So I married this person in the Catholic Church, not even realizing marriage is sacred. I thought marriage was just kind of like not to say a joke, but something like you could just, if it doesn't work, just toss it to the side, right? My parents were both married and divorced and moved on. And really, what do you see on TV? You see people sleeping around on each other. You see adultery quite often, right? Well, this marriage ended in adultery, and he ended up leaving. I
Shawna,
actually, at this,
Shawna, if
yes,
I could ask, just to clarify, what a powerful story. So how did you end up getting married in the Catholic Church? Was that your faith, or how did that play into how did the Catholic Church play into you getting married, and how did that all come together?
oh yes, I guess I left that out. I was Catholic in the sense that I had my sacraments as a kid. Um, Back in the day when I went to school, the school kind of got you through your sacraments. The teachers would actually take you over to the church at times, and that's kind of how it was back in the 90s in where I'm from. The only time the parents really were involved was like the actual day of your sacrament, they came to church with you, right? Other than that, the school taught you everything about your sacraments, whereas now it's different. The parents have to be involved, and the parents come to the parish. But it was different back when I was younger. So anyways, I was Catholic, and it was something that was my faith. I was in the Catholic school system, but to be honest, we never went to church. I didn't even know you could know God or have a relationship with him. That was all foreign to me. But I guess in my mind, I thought it's right to get married in a church, and I was Catholic. So I went that route. So that's kind of where that developed.
So what was his faith?
He was Catholic as well, but not
Okay.
practicing.
Okay. So continue on. So you got married in the
Yeah.
Catholic Church, and then you ended up in divorce, and you said there
Yes.
was abuse within that relationship. Okay.
Yes. It wasn't a healthy marriage at all. It was pretty much mimicking what I seen growing up. It was unhealthy and not a place you'd want to raise a child, or a foundation that you'd want for a child to have to live through. So he ended up leaving, and I actually ended up going back to school, and I actually got my grade 12, and it was hard, and I did it because I did quit school in grade 9. So here I am now taking adult education, getting my grade 12, and I went on to a program, a secondary school program, because I knew I needed to make a certain amount of money to take care of my son and I, now that I was a single mother. And then at this time of my life, I thought, there's got to be more to life than what I'm living. There's got to be more to life than this. I was like at the bottom of the barrel, and I thought there has to be more than this. And I ended up going back to church. And through going to church, I met this elderly lady who was like a grandmother. And I met this priest who was retired. And actually through meeting this priest, that's how I got involved with the process of an annulment. He told me all about the annulment process, and he actually helped me get the paperwork that I was working through that as well. And then I ended up being told that there's prayer meetings in this church basement. And I didn't even know what a prayer meeting was. And I thought, well, I'll go to these prayer meetings and see. And through going to these prayer meetings, these people in the church and these ladies around me would say that God spoke to them. And I was kind of wondering, how does God speak to you? Like, I kind of thought maybe these women were crazy or they were nuts. And I kind of thought, what did I get myself into? But then at the same time, I did feel really nurtured around them. Like I felt peaceful around them. They kind of built me up. I felt really good around them. So then I ended up soon hearing that there'd be a youth retreat coming to this parish. And I thought, well, I'll sign up and go to this youth retreat. I wasn't really technically a youth. I was in my 20s, mid 20s. And I thought, well, I'll go to this retreat. And I went with one of my aunt and uncles. And when I was standing in the pew, the man putting on the retreat said, imagine God's before you. And I actually heard words. They seemed like they were audible, but they could have been within my heart. But I heard a voice say to me, I'm your father and I love you. And I remember I looked over at my uncle and my aunt and I said, God spoke to me. God spoke to me. And my uncle kind of looked at me and he goes, oh, okay. So I looked like this crazy person, but I heard those words. I heard them. And then I was told, now there's supper in this church basement. And I remember going downstairs, like, how do you eat food now? Like, I was so excited. I remember even going in the bathroom and telling people that God spoke to me. And then I was told something called adoration was about to begin upstairs. I didn't even know what adoration was. I had no idea. Like, I would never even heard of this. And I thought, well, I want to be a part of this. You know, I was so excited. Like, I'm just taking this all in. And of course, there's reconciliation at the retreat as well. So I had gone to confession. And then now adoration was about to begin. And I remember going back up to the top of the church and I seen on the pews that there was Kleenex boxes. And I remember thinking, why are there Kleenexes? Like, is this an emotional thing? What is this? And I went into where I was going to sit. And you got to remember, I had just heard those words. So my heart was starting to open. And the priest came in with the monstrance and he put it down on the altar and he said a bunch of blessings. And then at this time, the lights were down and there was just candles lit and the band started playing music really loud. So no one was looking at me or could hear me. And I remember just closing my eyes and deep within my heart, I was just begging God to help me, to heal me and to change me. And I was just giving everything to him. And I felt this love and peace come over me. And it was really strong. And it felt like these bubbles were being pulled out of me, like as if they were coming up. And as it was coming up, I remember just bawling and bawling. And I had a long sleeve shirt on and you could wring out my sleeves. I was just wailing and wailing. And you cannot tell me that God isn't real because he touched my heart. He touched my heart. I remember I went home that night, like I couldn't even sleep. Like I just had this big encounter with God. I thought I'm going to call this old lady tomorrow that I knew from the prayer meeting. And she's going to tell me what happened because my faith was so small at the time. And I thought she had all the answers. And I remember her telling me that God gave me a new heart. And she told me I should look in the Bible under Ezekiel 36:26. And I actually didn't even own a Bible. My son just happened to have a Bible from school. So I read the passage of that Bible, of that passage, a new heart. A new heart I will give you, and a new spirit I will put within you. And I will take out of your flesh the heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. Adoration is time with you and God. It could be quiet time. It could be you reading the Bible. It could be you just journaling. It's time basically with you and God is what adoration is. And to be honest, I had no clue when I had my encounter what adoration really was. So for me, this was a totally awesome experience of knowing God firsthand and knowing I was actually in his presence.
So go ahead. So talk about you being in God's presence and so what exactly was that like? What did you feel? What did you hear?
I felt just this love and peace around me and it was really strong. And then I remember just closing my eyes and asking him within my heart, from the bottom of my heart, to help me, to heal me. And then I felt these bubbles that were coming out of me and being pulled up. And as they were coming up, I remember just bawling and bawling and bawling. And I had, like I said, a long sleeve shirt on. And you could wring out my sleeves. I was wailing so hard. And you cannot tell me that God isn't real because he touched my heart. He touched my heart, the deepest bottom of my heart. But the thing is, when I went home, I had asked this lady, and I had just finished telling you about what she had told me in the Bible to look up Ezekiel 36:26. And I felt like at the time right after, I was on this high cloud, you know. I just felt like on the top of the world, like I now knew God was real and I now knew that he loved me. You know, before this actually happened, I thought that God only loved perfect people. I had no idea that everything I've been through that he would want me. Do you know why? Because I grew up with that mentality that if you've done something wrong, he's going to come after you with a stick. You know, you're going to be punished for that. And that's at all not like God. He's a merciful Father. He knows what I've been through. Anybody's been through. He knows exactly how you were formed and shaped in your life and what you've been through. He looks at all that. He looks at your heart. Yes, I did things that were wrong. Yes, I repented of those things. But God sees the root of everything. He is merciful. And for me to know that he loved me, even though I've done all the things I've done, and that he still loved me, to me, that just changed me. You know, it just made me want to try harder. It made me want to be a better person. And I now knew that I needed to smarten up and get my life on track. And I started to take steps in my life that were more positive, of going to mass every Sunday. And actually, since that day, I went to mass every Sunday since. And I keep up with going to the sacrament of confession. I have a daily walk with God that I'm on each and every day. And, you know, things aren't always perfect in my life. They never will be. That's unrealistic. This isn't like a fantasy movie, you know, life is life. And we all have ups and downs and hurdles. But the thing is, now I know I can take whatever's bothering me and give it to Jesus. And I can ask him to help me and to strengthen me and to give me grace to get through each trial I'm going through right now. And he's always going to be there for me. And, you know, it doesn't mean that I'm totally put everything in his hands and I don't have at all any anxiety at times, or, you know, no, I still go through times where I have periods of feeling emotions. But the thing is, now, like I said, I can take that to my Father, because God is my Father. And to be honest, I grew up without my dad in my life at all. So for me, it was really, really hard to look at God a little bit as a father figure in the beginning, and to really trust, you know, that he's there. But, you know, God is my heavenly Father, and my Father, I'm grateful for the Father I have on earth, because he gave me life, but he wasn't a very good father. But I have been praying now for God to heal my father and to heal my family, and for conversions for them as well. And I know with my own life that I had a conversion. So I do believe that God will do what's best in my family members' lives, and that they will turn to God eventually.
Shawna, if I can ask on that point, and I'm glad to hear that you're praying for your family, but you also too, you still have your memories of the past. So as you think about your family, your father and your mother and all things, so how are you dealing with your history? Because I don't think that's erased. I think that's still part of your memory. So how are you dealing with your past? So when thoughts of your past come back to you, or you remember certain situations, or even the loss of your first baby to the awful act of abortion, so how do you deal with those thoughts and those memories and those feelings now that you renewed your relationship with God?
Well, to be honest with you, I actually don't have any more thoughts from my abortion as if shame or guilt or anything. That's one area I can honestly tell you. God has taken that all away. That has been a grace. Yes, it was horrible that I did that. And yes, I went to confession and I confessed that sin, but I don't beat myself up over that at all. That's kind of been something that's been dealt with, and you know, I've been healed of. There are times I've had to work through, of course, abandonment issues, or, you know, rejection from not having parents in my life. Like I said, I grew up without really parents or a foundation. So there's been a lot of growing, where what I do is, when I notice things pop up, like I have through my healing journey, is I take them to God, and like, I'll ask him to help me with this, or, you know, or I'll talk to somebody, like talk to a counselor or talk to a priest. I have found that, like, as a child, I would keep everything in, right? I would just let it eat at me. And now I'm the actual opposite. I maybe say too much. I like to get everything out. I am a big into knowing that conversation's healing. But I also want to say that there are times where you will have a conversation with a particular person and it won't be the way you want it to be. It will be actually, it can go south, right? So you need to be cautious of who you speak to. And if you ever do speak to somebody and you find it's not a right fit, then go to someone else. Don't just give up. Like, don't give up and think I'm not going to try again, or I'm not going to speak to anybody. No, keep searching, because it took me a few people to talk to before I found the right people.
Right.
So I just want people to know that, like, don't give up in a sense of getting things out and getting help, because you should never give up.
I think that's just wonderful advice. Now you brought up something called rejection, and I think that's something that a lot of people really deal with, and we probably don't really understand the impact of that, or we may call that the spirit of rejection and the spirit of abandonment. You want to talk a little bit more about your thoughts about this, about rejection and abandonment, and how you have found healing with those particular things? Because as you know, when those things are unresolved in our lives, we end up doing self-defeating, maybe self-destructive things to help fill that wound. So how have you dealt specifically with the feelings of rejection and abandonment?
Rejection and abandonment are roots that can grow quite deep into you.
Right.
What I find helps is, I guess, if you read the Bible there and you keep declaring that you're a child of God, and just allowing some scripture like that, of reassuring scriptures of love and of God's mercy and God being with you, and just allow that to soak in. Like, just even if you have to like tape it up on your fridge or, on your mirror, just things like that. I found having affirmation from others, not saying, hey, you're the greatest person. No, I mean like affirmation, like, you know what? I really like your shirt. Shawna, I really like your hair. And, when I first started to hear those things, I didn't accept them right away. I kind of was like, ooh, I don't know how to take a compliment. That's how wounded I was.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like, oh, okay, thanks. You get to that point. But I mean, I was from the point where I couldn't even take a healthy compliment and not have it like come at me as if it was a harmful thing, right? Because I was so wounded. But I think, like I said, speaking to somebody once again, reading scripture, going to adoration, going to confession. Confession is huge. In speaking to a priest about these wounds. And to be honest, on my journey throughout my life of healing, there are times where I kind of didn't realize at the beginning, but when I'd go to confession, there'd be a lineup of people, and I sadly would take a lot of time in there. And I now realize that wasn't, that's something I shouldn't have did, but I needed that. And I should have made a separate appointment, because I took almost an hour. I just felt good to talk to somebody.
An hour. Good for you.
Oh, I feel bad because I'd walk out of there and people would be kind of like, oh. But I mean, I didn't realize at the time, in my mind, it wasn't supposed to be a selfish thing. I just really needed it. Now I've learned to be respectful, and I'd make a side appointment or whatever. And I don't even take that long anymore. But
Sure.
At the beginning, you really need to talk to somebody. And
Sure.
I have to stress that please talk to somebody if you're having really bad negative thoughts, and a lot of things from your past are coming up, and they're kind of roadblocks and stopping you from making better choices in your life. I really want you to know that, like someone to know that.
Right. With confession, I know for our non-Catholic viewers, they may not quite understand what that is, so and you don't need to go into details about exactly what you say, but when you go to confession, what kind of things do you confess? And then what happens if it's the same thing over and over and over again? How do you deal with that?
Well, for one, a lot of the things I confess are venial sins now. And sometimes, I might have a same, like, for instance, if you have a
you don't need to share what it is, but
no,
if it's something that
you have a certain characteristic that pops up once in a while. Right. I guess basically what you do is you try to work at that, or if it's something that for instance, if something's done to you by someone and you have trouble, I guess, not reacting right away to it, you want to react right away. I guess the best thing to do is just to kind of go to a different room and breathe, take some deep breaths. And if you can do that, that's probably wise. Just things like that. If you need to work on different things in your character, that's, I guess, a way to look at it, is just to take little suggestions or going for walks, or spending time with God alone. Even if you have to go to a different area of your house, just to be with God in those moments. I find, though, confession is so healing, because you literally are with God in the confessional. Right. So, and then plus the priest prays with you in the confessional as well, if you ask him to. So
it's so powerful, because through confession, as a Catholic, the priest stands in the person of Christ. But what's nice about it, you're connected to another human being, but at the same time, that priest represents Christ. And quite often when we experience sin, we tend to isolate ourselves, and we feel that no one would want to be in relationship with us. But confession provides an opportunity for you to connect to another human being. You have that accountability, but at the same time, you experience forgiveness. It's just such a powerful sacrament. If I can ask you something else as well, you mentioned about your dad, but not having a dad. There's always been discussion about the impact of fatherlessness, not having a dad. So for you, growing up as a young woman, as a girl, how did not having a father really impact you? And what would you say to that young woman who never really had a healthy father in her life? What could she do to repair that wound? Because I think that's a real wound. I think as men, we don't really understand the impact it has upon girls and then women when a dad's not present, and what happens, or not having a healthy dad. So how would you speak to that young woman who's dealing with the loss of her father, for whatever that is? Well, what would you suggest? What could you share with her from your own experience? And what would you suggest as a way of healing from fatherlessness?
Well, a lot of the times when I was growing up, of course, without my father around, I made choices as a young girl to seek love in places that wasn't right. I was looking for a man to tell me, you're beautiful, or, you're special, or to give me attention. So those are the ways I acted out as a teenager. And I did things that were wrong, but I was looking for affirmation. I never seen a role model of a father being healthy. So of course, sadly, my first marriage, I chose someone that, wasn't quite healthy. I didn't know what healthy was. I didn't see what healthy, I didn't even know what healthy meant. I didn't know what was normal, like so-called normal, right? Or what a balanced family is. But it's so crucial for a child to have their parents in their life, especially a girl to have her father, because that's who she's going to look at for her future spouse.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that, I had a kind of like, I grew up in a mentality where I was in control. No one's going to take care of me. No one's going to watch out for me. I have to watch out for myself. I got to do everything myself. So anyways, that's kind of how I grew up, and I made poor choices. But then when I had my conversion with God, and I realized that God is my father, that really started to change my heart towards who a man, father is, what a man is. And I remember even crying and crying and crying in my room after I had my conversion and God touched my heart. And one day in particular, I was sitting on my bed, I'm trying to mend my relationship with my father. I've tried so many times, even as an adult now, and he doesn't want nothing to do with me. He just doesn't know how to be a father. But, I remember one day in particular crying in my bed and just, God, like, why doesn't my dad love me? Like, why? why doesn't my dad love me? How come he's walked out on me? I'm feeling sorry for myself. And then when I look back at those words, I am your father and I love you. Those words that God spoke to me. And I actually allowed those to come into my heart. That's what helped me get through that. But like I say, if God ever tells you something specific, and I believe the reason I heard that was because I needed to hear that, because it would come back later where I needed those words to find healing from that wound of rejection.
Yeah.
I needed those words at that time for a reason. And that's why God gave those to me. And right now, like I said, I've been trying to have a relationship with my dad. Now it's just to the point where I'm totally healed from that.
Mhm.
And I've just let it go. I do pray for him, but the thing is, I do pray for my dad. But the thing is, what else really helps? And I'm just going to tell everyone that what helps is if you can look back at that particular person, like for instance, my dad. And if I find out a little bit about his past, like say I found out a little bit about some of the things he went through as a kid, that helps me because I can see the roots in his life.
Right.
Like my dad lost his father when he was young. So maybe my dad didn't know how to be a father, right? So I look now with eyes of compassion on people. I look at people now with eyes of compassion because part of growing up from this isn't not necessarily the worst horrible thing.
Right.
I am now a very empathetic and compassionate person. I can look at somebody and I can see kind of the roots of where they came from now. And I don't judge them because I know how things can shape you to make choices.
Right.
So I took something really ugly and I've turned it for good. I hope that clarifies your question.
It really does. That's very, very powerful. And what I find so amazing that in your journey, you're able to see the woundedness in your own dad and find out why he was the way he was. We talk about generational trauma, or in biblical terms, we talk about generational sins. It seems that whatever our parents or grandparents or great grandparents weren't able to resolve, it tends to be passed down through generation until finally somebody says, okay, well, I want to stop the cycle of rejection. I want to stop the cycle of abandonment. And you develop compassion. You have it doesn't excuse what they did, but you develop empathy. You now understand, okay, so that's why my dad was not able to be a dad, because of what he experienced. And then through your own journey, you start doing healing for yourself, so you don't pass that spirit of rejection and abandonment into the future. That's a significant step, and it takes some people a long time to get to that spot because they're still very angry, and very upset about what they experienced in the family of origin. But it sounds like God got you to this point where you're able to have empathy for the wounds that your family, maybe your generations have experienced in the past, so that's just wonderful. Well, our time is getting close. It's such a wonderful discussion. We have a few more minutes. Anything that you want to close with and just say in the next minute or so that to that listener that may be listening to maybe to that young woman or that man that may be dealing with abandonment and rejection? Any last words you would like to offer to that person that's listening?
I just want you to know that no matter what you've been through, that God loves you and that God sees your heart. And you are not defined by your mistakes. The reason we choose things is, like I discussed, was because of woundedness in our lives or just the way we reacted to certain things that were done to us. It does not mean that we're horrible, terrible people. God knows exactly what you've been through. And I want you to know that you are loved. And I want you to know that you have a lot of worth and that you're priceless and that you can change your life, that you have control of turning your life around. You can either do the same thing you grew up with and repeat that same old cycle, or you can rise above that and do better for your children. And that's what I did. I didn't want my kids to grow up with what I had. So I changed my life and I stopped that cycle. And you have the control and the power to stop the cycle. And please, if you are going through something that is a roadblock or hurting you, Please speak to somebody. Do not hold that in and talk to somebody.